Is that rocking? 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 I want to thank the organizers of this virtual Juneteenth event, to the House of Ease. Thank you so much. Oh, we have 26 people on Crowdcast. I see you. I wish I could see your faces, but that's all right. I know you are there, so I'm glad you are in the house. Again, I want to thank House of Ease for this wonderful invitation and this opportunity. Aaron, thank you so much, my brother, for reaching out. And again, Justine, thank you so much for everything that you are doing now and you will do throughout the course of this talk. So again, my name is Monroe Howard, and I'm a life coach. And I'm so excited to be a part of this event, this celebration of freedom, because when we think about this whole concept of these masks of masculinity that we often wear, and I'll say we particularly, and I know we may definitely have others in here who may not identify as men or as a man, so I welcome all identities, and I think the conversation can be valuable for everyone. But I will speak for myself as a man who identifies as a cisgender man, that there are definitely masks that I've worn. These masks that have, in many ways, allowed me to perform, right? Hear what I'm saying, allowed me to perform for individuals and for spaces in response to trauma and experiences that I've endured or I've been a part of during my childhood, and actually that has continued on in many aspects even into adulthood. So when we look at the mask of masculinity and removing them, there is a sense of liberation, freedom, emancipation, right? That we can all experience if we are able to embark on this journey. Now, let me tell you something right now. This journey is not for the faint at heart, right? But each and every one of us can do it. Each and every one of us are entitled to the liberation, to the freedom, right? That inherently belongs to us as human beings who walk this earth. So I don't want you to be discouraged by anything that you may hear today when it comes to how we embark upon this journey. And also, I want you to know that each one of us has our own specific, unique journey. So within this discussion today, if there's something that you take away from it and it resonates with you, or if there are some things within my own personal narrative, again, that you can identify with, that is wonderful. But understand that there is no one size fits all. And that is the beauty of humanity, because all of us exist in this beautiful spectrum of expression, this beautiful spectrum of existence. And it is very important that we honor that in all that we do, even in our healing journey. Oh my gosh. Again, if you have comments, please go on and put them in. I would love to hear from you. So let's just dive in. I mean, when we talk about the mask of masculinity, and I'm going to introduce maybe a few of these masks here. There was a book by Lewis Howes called The Mask of Masculinity, and it really impacted me as I was reading it, because I found a lot of similarities in the things that we do. And I'm going to go back to this piece on performance, right? I'm sure many of us can identify with performance. I was saying last night to somebody who's really special to me, I said, it is a weight and it is a pressure to have to feel like you have to perform consistently and constantly. And that if you misalign, if you miss a step, that you yourself, your show will be canceled. What do I mean by that? That in this performance that you feel like, that many of us feel like we must do for people based on societal norms, social constructs, familial expectations, right? Ideologies and dogmas that may come from places that are set up to be a source of inspiration and solace, like church, even our local barbershops for us as Black men. At times there are, again, traumas that are perpetuated in these spaces, which then cause us to have to develop protection. How do we protect ourselves? And in many ways that comes through performance. And so as I talk about the genesis of my journey, it really is rooted in the childhood in which I experienced, which I was loved, I was cared for, I was supported. I had a wonderful, wonderful mother, single parent home, and a mother who loved me and provided for me, and a wonderful extended family and immediate family. I had a wonderful church experience. I was rooted in the Black church tradition and the Christian faith, but it was very apparent to me that as a young child who was coming to terms with his sexual orientation, that as a young Black gay boy, really understanding that and how I was going to show up in the world, it was very, very apparent to me that heteronormativity, right? Heterosexuality was what was right. And that anything that deviated from that was, in some cases, a sin, as it was told to me, an abomination, not right, abnormal, right? These are some of the things that we hear if we have any type of deviation from what society has said or prescribed, that this is how you should be, this is what you should believe, this is what you should think or accept. There's this book here that I reference a lot, right? It's called The Four Agreements. And in here, the author, Don Miguel Ruiz, talks about the human domestication process. The human domestication process. And he acknowledges that as we were born, we started to become bombarded with messages and all of these things, even our names. Think about that. We didn't choose any of that. And many of us, depending on our culture, depending on the environment that we were raised in, there were religious beliefs and contexts that were imposed upon us. Again, when you're talking about being a man in this space, there were these socialized norms that began to be imposed upon us about what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine. And a lot of these things, when it comes to being a man and being masculine, right, become synonymous with strength, and sometimes brute strength, right? Aggression. When it comes to being masculine and being a man, a lot of these things that we were socialized to be is that there is no room for vulnerability, no room for weakness. And so we hear certain things, narratives, right? Audible and those that are implicit in saying, suck it up, be a man. Men don't cry. And when you, as a child, who, as the book says, right, and I want to read this directly, when we are young, we are supposed to be able to learn, to lean on other people. However, we are taught that at a young age, right, that there is no room for weakness. How many of you that resonates with at some point in your life, that there was where you were told that there's no room for weakness? If you exhibited some sign of vulnerability in your youth, that there was no room for weakness. Boys don't do that. Girls do that. So let's just sit there for a moment and let's understand and let's accept, right, that what Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in his book, The Four Agreements, is that there is a human domestication process in which we are downloaded with all of these messages that tell us who and how, right? What and when, where. And for us, where the Four Agreements goes on to say is that we begin to accept that. We begin to internalize that. And as human beings who are conditioned to adapt, to survive, we then begin to develop mask. We begin to perform because we understand, and in my case, as a young man, it was clocking every single move I made. Don't say that. Don't sit that way. Don't do that. Let's talk about this. Somebody has a question in here. Heads up, we're all recording. Okay, did we have, oh, I thought we had a question in here. So again, that is my journey where I started with the performance and with the different masks. And some of these things were becoming so ingrained and inherent that they really become rote exercises, right? To where automatically, autopilot, I have conditioned myself that this is the way you are supposed to act. All right. So what are some of these masks that we talked about? And as I say some of these masks, again, I can't see you directly, but I do see that Justine is dropping in some comments. Let's see here. Trey says, love the use of the four agreements to bring perspective. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, the book definitely is something that if you have not read it, and it's an easy read, that I really, really do suggest that you read it. Well, let's talk about some of the masks that we, as men, we develop. So there's the stoic mask, right? This mask that basically shows almost no sign of emotion, even in times that emotion is called for. Emotion is healthy. Emotion should be embraced and celebrated, right? Think about this stoicism that does not allow us to feel or to outwardly express how we are feeling. If we're hurt, we can't express that pain. If we're scared, if we're frightened, if we're concerned, we can't express that in our outward expression. So there is a suppression through this stoic mask of your humanity, right? And we do know that there are the socialization of women, right, in many instances to where this is embraced. But for men, again, men don't cry, boys don't cry, suck it up, right? Then we talk about the athlete mask, right? Competition, understanding that the survival of the fittest, how many trophies, how many accolades, right? Through the expression of athleticism, can you accumulate? And what does that say about your worth? I'll dive into my narrative. When I was in high school, I had all of my friends were hoopers. You know, they all played basketball. We had a little joke, was like, look, if I'm gonna play with y'all, we going on the private courts. We don't go to the public park, right? Because I look like a hooper. You know, I got the walk, I got the talk, I can stand there, I got the stance and the demeanor. But baby, you get me on that court. Now, I'm not terrible now. I'm not terrible. So we're not gonna go there. But I definitely did not meet the standard of what I felt like was public court play, right? And so I remember being in high school and constantly comparing myself to my brothers, my friends who had these athletic abilities. And I then would diminish the abilities that I had, right? I'm a natural born leader. I'm a singer, right? I'm an actor. Like there were these things that I was able to do and things that I love to do, but thinking about what society says is celebrated for a man, a Black man in particular, if I did not play basketball or excel in this place, you know, what is the measure of your worth? So I tried to be this athlete, right? And I own my truth, so it's all right. You know, I went out for that freshman team and didn't make it, but became the equipment manager. I know, I'm sure I got some laughs going on over there. I own my truth. I didn't dealt with the trauma. But I tell you though, it was one of those things where it humbled me. And it really, really, really made me think about, first of all, hard work and ethic and everything else. But I had to endure the blow to my ego. And I also had to become comfortable with what was intrinsic to me, what were my abilities, what were my innate talents. And I end with this on this part of the narrative that in our senior year of high school, we went all the way to the state championships. I'm from Sacramento, California. So at that time, it was on the courts of the Sacramento Kings at Arco Arena. My best friend, who was one of the star players on the team, and myself were both on that court. I was singing the national anthem. He led our team to victory. But through that time, I had begun to embrace who I authentically was, right? And not try to be somebody else. So sometimes that's the athlete mask, right? And we're bred in this competition. Well, then we go into, again, talking about the accumulation of things, the material mask. How much can I amass? How much wealth? How much money? How many houses? Right? This material mass that then again is what we begin to build our self-worth on and what we begin to identify ourselves as instead of first being human beings, right? And as men, we are often measured by our wealth. Now think about some of those narratives that we hear growing up, right? A man is a provider. A real man has a lot of money, right? A real man, right, can provide, and also then a real man is someone who can in some instances flaunt or show off the things in which they've accomplished or they've amassed. The thing about the material mask is that it's sometimes in the pursuit of that, it's sometimes, and in my case, again, I'm sharing my narrative here, that it compels us to do whatever it takes to amass those possessions, even if those things go against our morals, our values, or inherently who we are authentically. But we are driven by this, we're compelled to be accepted. We are compelled to keep up the performance so that people like us, love us. People want to be around us, right? So the material mask is something that we develop because, again, no one wants to feel rejected. No one wants to feel isolated or alone. The sexual mask. Yeah, me too. Again, I don't know if there's anybody out there that this resonates, but thinking about our sexual libido, our prowess, right, is another expression of what it means to be a man. How many people, how many partners can you satisfy? And understand there's an inherent double standard here for men and women, because for men, it is almost celebrated when we are talking and touting our sexual conquests. And when we have multiple individuals that may desire us for our sexual abilities, right? This begins to reduce us to the performance aspect, again, is what we're talking about. In my case, when you are someone who has now began to accept your same gender loving status, right? Inherently how you were born and what you know is in who you are, it was very, very difficult to wear this mask because it caused me to lie, to deceive people and myself. What this made me do was is to enter into relationships in many instances with women, knowing that that was not my true authentic self. And then there was this built-in pressure to perform, because if I do not perform, if I am not able to satisfy in the context of sexual nature and to be able to satisfy this aspect of the relationship, well, then it started to develop these narratives in my head about my worth as a man. Who am I? Because I was not able to express myself in my most authentic state and form, which was loving another person of the same gender. So again, we have our sexual mask, and the sexual mask then a lot of times leads us to promiscuity or developing unhealthy coping mechanisms around the use of sex and sexuality. It reduces us a lot of times to objectifying ourselves and allowing others to objectify us because of the mask that we are touting, the mask that we are wearing in the realm of sexuality. Aggressiveness, I spoke about this before, right? We've talked about how the aggression is really what is celebrated in young boys. It starts then, right? Rough and tumble. And then in many instances, it is quelled or it is discouraged, right, in young women. But it is something that shows that you are powerful. You have the ability to dominate, and you use that through aggressive and angry measures. And what we don't understand is that actually there is power in our influence that does not have to include aggression at all. How do we then begin to develop the inner strength and the inner fortitude that then begins to emanate into the atmospheres that we walk into And that has nothing to do with an expression of our aggression. Can our influence be rooted in the confidence in knowing exactly who we are and establishing boundaries for how we interact with individuals and how we want to be treated and how we want to be respected, and in turn, how we treat and respect other people? Once again, many of us have hidden behind the mask of aggression, and understanding that for us, there's really only these polar opposites of being happy or angry, and not identifying, embracing, and actually utilizing the myriad of emotions that lie within, right? We look at the Joker mask. I know this is one, I'm not quick witted like this, right? But I know that a lot of us who have been ridiculed for certain things, and again, I'm using my narrative when it comes to sexual orientation, but there are many things that, we have been ridiculed. You could have been ridiculed because of your socioeconomic status, right? How many know that some of the funniest people in the classrooms, the class clowns, were actually jokesters because they were trying to hide or mask the pain? They understood that if I told a joke, it would then distract individuals from actually seeing who I am, or seeing past the very superficial nature of what I'm wearing, the color of my skin, right? All of these things that people begin to measure worth, how I walk, how I talk, right? The disability that I may have, the intellectual or cognitive disabilities that, or delays that may exist, right? That makes me different, that makes me other. And so we use the mask of being the jokester again to distract and to deflect. And in some instances, that distraction and deflection becomes a weapon that we use against others to inflict pain that we ourselves do not want to process, do not want to unpack, in the pain and the trauma that then exists. How can I understand and know exactly who you are if what you present to me is always in jest, in jokes? Now, laughter is good for the soul. I'm a brother who loves a good laugh. And I love when laughter can come from truth, when laughter can come from a place of confidence and self-awareness and self-worth. So again, what are we using to mask the pain and the trauma that we feel? And instead of healing from it, we choose to deal with it, right? So then we have this mask of invincibility. I can do anything, nothing can touch me, which in many instances begins to have us take risk that don't necessarily just need to show up in jumping out of a plane, which I've done my 30th birthday, and I'm glad I did that, right? But there are risks that we take in how we then treat our bodies. If I'm abusing substances, if I'm abusing alcohol as a means of coping, there might be this sense of invincibility that says, listen, I can do whatever, whenever, and however, but I'm here and I'm going to be here. No matter what the toll is, both inward, emotionally, mentally, right, spiritually, and also outward, what it's doing to our physical bodies. But there is this sense of invincibility. I have someone in my family who I swear has 9 lives, but who I understand there are certain risks that he takes and has been taking throughout his entire life because he has not dealt with the pain of rejection and hurt and fear, and understanding that and actually diving into that and unpacking that, right? So we have the mask of invincibility. We have the mask of knowing it all. Knowing it all. Having to step into a room and not being okay with stepping back and being able to be vulnerable and saying, I'm here to learn. I'm not familiar with that. Because what we've been told is, and especially as Black men, you must be twice as good as your white counterparts, right? And so for many of us, this overachiever, this type A, sometimes to the point of mental and physical exhaustion, where we are taking on too many things at once because we feel like we have something to prove. I've learned, and I'm continuously learning, that I have nothing to prove to anyone, to any space. All I have to prove to myself is that I am going to honor my authenticity, and that the only thing that I owe these spaces, the only thing that I owe these people is bringing my authentic self every single time, so that that encounter can be genuine, that encounter can be of substance, because they are dealing with me, not the mask. So it's okay if you don't know it all. It's okay if you ask questions. It is okay if you seek understanding. And it is actually a sign of wisdom. And it is a wonderful use of the skill for us to become empathetic and compassionate towards each other as we actually listen to understand and not listen to respond, right? So I don't have to know it all. And then finally, again, we have the mask, the alpha mask, right? I am male, hear me roar. I am male, I am better. I am male, I am first. I am male, I am dominant. I am male, I am everything. And for some, that means you are subservient. So how does that play out in our relationships with our spouses and our partners? How does that play out in our relationships for those of us who may be fathers, parents, caretakers? How does that play out in our friendships? How does that play out, right, in our familial relationships with others outside of our spouses and our children? So thinking about I must be, I have to be, I will always be, right, breeds this ego and this inflated sense of self that then does not serve us, because many a times with these masks, as we talked about, going to the material mask, a lot of that is built and that is rooted in our accumulation of things. I want to read a quote from the book, because as we were just talking about that, it really just came to me. And it says here, actually, it comes from the ego. Actually, Orison Swett Martin says, this is a test of your manhood. How much is there left in you after you've lost everything outside of yourself? I'll say that again. This is the test of your manhood. How much is there left in you after you've lost everything outside of yourself? Now let's think about that. What is left in you? Which talks about removing the mask of masculinity. If our focus is on the inward condition of our being, if our focus is on the inward condition of our spirits and our souls and our minds, regardless of what anything may be going on in the external space, what things may be stripped away from us, what is left in us is what is most valuable, and is the expression and the embodiment and the manifestation of our true manhood. So think about that. What is in you when everything, when everyone is gone? What's left? And that's the question. So I tell you again, this work is not for the faint at heart. And it is something that is an ongoing process, but it is something that giving you some inspiration and some encouragement to embark upon this journey if you yourself have not yet even thought about it, right? Here's 3 things that I approach in my life coaching practice, and I want to present this to you today as we think about removing the mask of masculinity. First, we must confront ourselves. Second, we need to discredit false narratives. And then third, we embrace our authentic selves. Again, first, we need to confront ourselves. Second, we need to discredit false narratives, dispel negative thoughts. And then third, we need to embrace our authentic self. So you may ask, confronting myself, what does that mean? What does that entail? Now, I'm going to tell you this was probably the hardest part of my journey. Confronting Monroe. Having to take a hard look at my actions, my deeds, my thoughts, my patterns, and understanding that I must take ownership. That's the first step. Because many of us are rooted in this space of fear. And no matter how we project through the use of these masks, many of us are rooted in spaces of fear that then cause us to overcompensate with the use of these different masks versus just accepting our vulnerability. And so it causes us to lie. It causes us to deceive. It causes us to just put on, again, perform. I was putting on, I was lying, I was deceiving, I was hurting people in the process, I was hurting myself. And I did not take responsibility for the actions and for the decisions. So when I had to face myself, I had to get real with myself. It was a difficult process to really see myself for the first time. Because what happens is that as we wear these masks, and again, let's take it back to childhood and the places in which we began to develop these masks and the foundation and how it becomes this inherent way in which we interact, we deal with, we show up in the world. It is a lot then to have to unpack that and strip away all of the superficial exterior to get to the core. And so what I saw at the core as I was beginning to remove some of these masks, I did not like. It made me ashamed. I was hurt by it. I was traumatized by the lie that I had perpetuated in some areas of my life for this extended period of time. So as I confronted myself, I had to peel back the layers. Now, you ask, how do you confront yourself? You know, for some of us, and I recognize this as a privilege and an opportunity and access, therapy was one of the main catalysts for me to begin to unpack the lies, for me to begin to unpack the hurt that I had received and that I had inflicted upon other people. It helped me to look at and to face the trauma that was the impetus for why I felt like I needed to present in this way. The other thing is that I had to start being honest with myself and with other people. So as I began to face me, I then had to accept all of me. And I had to become honest with the parts of me that weren't so shiny, that weren't so beautiful, right? That might not be acceptable. These were the things, again, that had me crying at night. I don't want to paint a picture of roses and golden streets. This is hard work, y'all. But I tell you, it is necessary. Because then what happened is that the foundation that now I was working from was the actual raw material and began to be the essence of who I was. Now, then I had to move into the second phase, which was discrediting false narratives. Because as I started to confront myself, as I started to unpack the pain, as I started to unpack the trauma and to face the trauma, it began to reveal the narratives that I had developed in my head, the false narratives that were imposed upon me through society and through all of these other influential norms, right? Within my church, within the barbershop, within friend circles, sometimes within your family, on your job, right? These were things that I had to start then understanding where they came from and then beginning to apply truth. I am beautifully and wonderfully made in the image of my creator. That means all of me, not just aspects of me. That means all of me. That means my gay self is beautifully and wonderfully made in the image of God, the creator that I have chosen to subscribe to, right? Out of my experience. So these were false narratives that I had to combat. I had to combat that there was something wrong with me. I had to combat that there was a reason why I needed to hide. I had to combat that there was a reason why I needed to be ashamed, because those narratives are what I accepted, right? Going back to the four agreements, right? We have to accept these things. And then those were the things that I embraced, and those were the things that I carried out in my day-to-day life, in my relationships, which then caused me to be inauthentic and to lie and to hurt and to deceive. So I had to take ownership for that. But then I had to begin to dispel those false narratives, those negative thoughts that I was not good enough. And so the only way in which I could rise to a level of acceptability, that I could rise to a level of worthiness, was through amassing things, was through exerting my sexual nature onto things, to tout that, right? To giving it away, right? To not respecting myself enough to understand that actually what is in me inherently is worthy and precious. So again, these were these false narratives that I had to dispel. Because what they had started to do is, as I confronted myself, was to then tell me that my past actions, my past deeds, the past hurt that I had inflicted on would disqualify me from living a life of wellness, freedom, happiness, fulfillment, and joy. And I'm telling you today, if you are one of those people, I don't care where you are along this journey, if you are one of those people that you are hearing that narrative in your head right now that says that because of who you've been, who you are, where you've been, what you've done to others, what you've done to yourself, disqualifies you from being happy and whole and from getting your healing, I'm here to tell you right now that is a lie. And if you need to say it to yourself, say it to yourself until you begin to internalize and understand that you are worthy of your healing and your happiness and your wholeness. So again, we have to discredit these lies, these false narratives. And so through that process of confronting, understanding, embracing all of me, then beginning to develop these new narratives that tells me I am inherently, wonderfully, and beautifully made. That the power that exists within me is not something that is given from an external source, but the source of the creator that is not influenced by someone else's opinions or thoughts about me. And understanding that I actually begin to depersonalize people's comments, people's actions towards me, because I understand that that is something that they still have to deal with, but it does not reflect who I am or who I shall be. Again, I begin to develop new narratives that uplift, that allow me to begin to remove the mask, remove the stoic mask. I can show that I'm hurt. I can be vulnerable. I can show that I am jubilant. I can show my sensitivity. I can embrace my femininity, right? I can embrace the nurturing aspect of myself because I know that it all makes me who I am. And who I am at the core is who I'm supposed to be. So therefore, this becomes my new mantra. This becomes my new foundation for who Monroe is. This has to become your new foundation. Okay. Now, through that, as we begin to remove some of the mask, as we begin to accept and to embrace who we are, we now discover our authentic self, our authenticity that now shines through in spaces, in places, irregardless of whatever may be going on. Now I'll let you know, this is the journey. This is the part of the journey, the phase that I'm in, right? I'm walking in my authenticity. And I tell you here today, as a witness, y'all didn't think this was going to be church, but as a witness, I am here to let you know that the freedom, and how appropriate is it on Juneteenth, the freedom, the emancipation from the mask, the shedding of the mask, to just be authentically who you are, who I am, who we are created to be, is true fulfillment. Don't get it twisted, y'all. The world is going to tell us that what you drive, who you are with, what you wear, the titles that you hold, the positions that you hold, who you step on to raise yourself up is the measure of your worth. And I'm here to tell you it is not. The measure of your worth is your truth and your authentic self. That inherently is your worth. So tap into your worth. And our worth, because we are uniquely and wonderfully made, doesn't look like somebody else's. So I need you to also get comfortable with that. As you begin to take off your mask, you don't have to be the basketball player. You don't have to be the hoop star. You don't have to be the 6'3". You don't have to be the one who makes six figures. I can go on and on about the things that you don't have to be worthy. Now I see in here, I want to take a moment because we've got some. So from the poll responses, right? What were the ones that resonated with you? The type of mask, and we say the stoic mask, the sexual mask, and the alpha mask, right? And that's not surprising to me because again, it really feeds into this narrative of I'm not able to show any emotion. Showing my emotions are a sign of weakness. We talked about the sexual mask. We talked about the alpha mask, how we are bred to be the best. How we are bred to believe that you must be first or there is no other space and place. And that if you are not the alpha, what is your purpose? Let's see here. Cynthia says, hi, Monroe. Thank you for sharing your story and knowledge. Question. Did you seek support outside of therapy? Asking for help and support from friends and family can be uncomfortable. Cynthia, thank you so much for your question. The answer to your question is yes. Community is vitally important. Now, understanding and validating that seeking help and support from your friends and family is uncomfortable. Let me tell you what my discomfort was rooted in. My discomfort was rooted in rejection. If I sought support, if I said I was not okay, if I said I needed help, if I were to begin to peel back the layers and to show my true self, there was an element of fear, of rejection that permeated my soul, that for a while kept me isolated in my misery and turmoil. So what I say to you is that to recognize and to understand that the fear of rejection, which is very present for many of us, and in some cases is very valid because And I talked this, I worked 14, 15 years in youth development and understanding specifically around young people who are of the LGBTQIA community, right? There is some validity in the fear of being rejected by your family and what that can mean for your livelihood, your survival. Because unfortunately, we have individuals that can't even see the humanity of their children beyond the scope of their prejudiceness or their bigotry, right? Or their bias, right? Or their religious dogma that says this child that you have birthed, this child that you have been commissioned and endowed with caring for, is only reduced to a certain aspect of their identity that you see as not being worthy. So we talk about that and we understand that there is validity in some of those fears. But what I say to you is, though, there is someone, there is community somewhere that will embrace you for who you are, and even in your broken state. And that's where you need to get people at. The ones who can see you for your potential, but can recognize your humanity and that you are just like them, flawed, and you are a work in progress, but that embrace you and love you without strings and without conditions. Hear what I'm saying? Because there are people, and we have to be aware that people can see us in our vulnerable state. And if they are using that to manipulate you, that is not community. That is not support. So be very clear that as you seek support, whether it be from a family member, a friend, you must be clear that love and support does not have conditions on what you can do for them or what you need to be right now or who they think you should be. It should be about, I see you in your purest, rawest form of humanity, and you are worthy of my love and my support. So thank you for that question. Are there any other questions out there? So listen, folks. Justine, I don't see any other questions out there. But I'm going to wrap it up. And oh, hold on. Empress, doing great work. In a few seconds, leave up. Okay, that wasn't for me. Okay. Listen, as I begin to just wrap this up, I just want to encourage all of us, men. I know I'm primarily identifying and speaking with us men in this platform today, but to the women and to everyone, however you identify out there, I just want to leave us with this fundamental understanding and this fundamental belief that just as you are is more than enough. No mask. There's a love coach that I follow and who has now become a friend. His name is Byron Jamal, and I had him on my show, my live, probably a few weeks ago, and he talks about when he was a child, he had made this clay structure, and this clay structure he began to paint it, put all these wonderful colors and put all this other kind of stuff on it, and he was so happy that when his final project he had presented it to his parents. But then some of the paint started wearing off over time. And over time, he became upset because it didn't look as beautiful to him as it had been when he had presented it to his parents. The paint was coming off. And so he went to his parents feeling down and dejected because he no longer felt that clay structure that they had cherished and were so excited to receive that it was no longer worthy of their admiration or acceptance because the paint had come off. And what my friend, the love coach, Byron Jamal, said was, they looked at him and they embraced him and said, we loved it with or without the paint. The paint is not necessary. The mask is not necessary. What is necessary is that you and I do the work to confront, to discredit, to embrace so that we can show up each and every time as our authentic self. I want to thank everybody. Let's see here. 5 minutes. Okay. So that's the next thing. I want to take this moment again to just thank each and every one of you for participating in today's session. I want to thank the House of Ease for this invitation. I am honored and humbled to be a part of such a wonderful, wonderful expression of freedom, uplifting Black folks. Yes, right? Empowering Black folks to own our narratives, to be proud of our narratives, and to embrace our narratives, and to emancipate ourselves from the lies that folks have tried to impose upon us. And as you go on about the rest of your day, I hope that you can just carry that with you. You, how you were created, just as you are, pain or no pain, are more than enough. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Is that rocking? Is that rocking? Is that rocking? Is that rocking? Is that